Okay. Just going to give it a second so everyone can connect to audio. Okay, perfect. Well, welcome everyone. Hope that you're having a good week so far. We're really excited to have Cardno Kimris back with us to talk a little bit about their organization and their programs. So we have Pamela and Lane here today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pam.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. It's so nice to see such a great turnout. Lane and I are here from a company called Cardno Chemrisk. Little bit of a caveat. We actually just got purchased by another company earlier this year. And so our name is kind of changing. So we're not currently Cardno Chemrisk, we're Chemrisk now Stantec. So it might be a little bit confusing in the presentation. You'll hear probably more about Stantec than you will about Cardno. And that's only because we're changing names a little bit, but either way, we're excited to talk to you all today. We've come and recruited at Johns Hopkins for many, many years. We have several alumni that work for our organization and have worked for our organization over the years. So it's definitely a great program, and we love to get students from there. So just a quick schedule of what we're going to do today. We're going to first introduce ourselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about our company, the history of our company, and just about scientific consulting in general. And then Lane is going to talk to you about some of our work and cool projects that we've done over the past few years. And then we'll talk to you about some employee perspectives so that you know what it's like to work for our company. And then at the end, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So just a little bit about me. My name's Pamela Armstrong. I am based out of Chicago. I've been with the company for just a little over 11 years now. My background is actually not scientific. I got my undergrad in business management from UCF, and then master's in organizational development and human resources from University of Louisville. So I'm actually the talent acquisition manager for our company, and I also do quite a bit with employee relations and engagement and things like that.
And hi, I'm Lane. I actually work in the DC office out of Chemrisk, Stantec now. I've been with the company for about 1.5 years, but I also interned with them during my master's program, which I studied ecotoxicology and environmental health at Duke University, and am originally from Dallas, Texas, and went to the University of Texas at Austin with bachelor's in biology and French, so hook 'em horns. But since I've really started with Chemrisk full time, I've had my primary focus areas of mostly working with exposure assessment to certain chemicals and just contaminants. So like coal fly ash, diacetyl flavorings, asbestos and talc, benzene, lots of other chemicals that we'll get into more. And I also tend to focus a little more on toxicology and industrial hygiene, and kind of dabble in some epi, like, work at that comes and goes. That's just a quick background on me, and we'll get more into it.
Okay, so a little bit about the history of the company. So we were founded in 1985 as a joint venture with a company called McLaren Hart, which was another engineering company. And then the newest version of Chemrisk was launched in 2003 by a gentleman named Dr. Dennis Postenbach. And so we kind of functioned like that as a startup for several years until about 2012 when we got purchased by Cardno. And then we acted as Cardno Chemrisk for about 10 years. And then just recently, as I mentioned, we got purchased by Stantec. So both Cardno and Stantec are larger global engineering companies. So really kind of the same type of company. So it's been a pretty seamless transition with each iteration. Even though we started as a startup and then we kind of got purchased by larger corporations, we've still kind of maintained our independence, and really the core of what we do is exactly the same. So we've just had some name changes and some changes to, some HR type things like benefits. But overall, the core of what we do and who we are has always been the same. Okay, so this is just a little bit about Stantec. They started in 1954 as a one-person firm. And then today they span across 350 locations, 6 continents. There's over 22,000 employees within Stantec, so it's a very, very large company. During the pandemic, they were able to maintain their business continuity by mobilizing all 22,000 people to work remotely. They were able to complete three acquisitions during the pandemic. So while a lot of companies were downsizing and having tough times, Stantec was actually growing pretty quickly. And so that's just a testament to, how agile they are, and that they were able to do that and still maintain some success. Then in early 2021, they were named the 5th most sustainable company in the world, the 1st in North America by the Corporate Knights, and 5th across the world. So that's a huge kudos to them, us, I should say, now that we're part of Stantec. Further reinforcing their commitment to sustainability, they also pledged their commitment to carbon neutrality by 2022. So that's another one of their big initiatives that they have going on. And then hopefully achieving net zero operations by 2030. So just a little bit about the company and who they are. These are the different service lines within Stantec. So as you can see, they've got buildings, energy and resources, infrastructure, water, but we fall within the environmental services service area. So you can kind of see a little bit about all the different types of things that they do. Okay, and then a little bit more about us. So we use risk assessments to solve different challenges in public health, or sometimes occupational or environmental health as well. So with this, we pull from multidisciplinary skill sets, which we'll kind of touch on again in a few minutes when we talk more about our project work. But these are kind of all the different skills that we use within our projects, and we do this to solve to find out what the different hazards are that we're assessing. And so hazards can be found within, consumer products, within the environment, within foods, contaminated sites, media, soil, water, anything like that. So again, when we talk about our project work in a few minutes, you'll kind of see what that means. But basically, risk assessment is really kind of the core of what we do in solving, what hazards can do to human health. So this is our just kind of a breakdown of our team. We have about 100 employees overall. About 85 of those are technical staff members, but our staff are a mix of people from different public health backgrounds. So we have toxicologists, epidemiologists, industrial hygiene, environmental health science, and then everybody works together as health scientists or consultants. And so what that means is that no matter what your background is in, so even if you come in with a degree in epidemiology, you don't get hired on necessarily to be an epidemiologist. You would be hired on as a health scientist, and then you might pull from your epi background, like on certain projects if it needs it. So, we kind of function a little bit like a law firm in that sense. So just based on, your degree level, you would come in at some level of health scientist, and then you would sort of move up your own growth pattern. So that's just kind of a fun way of saying that everybody sort of works on the same types of things, depending on, what your background is in. You can work on really any kind of project. So even if you come in again with an epi degree, you could still work on toxicology projects. You can work on industrial hygiene projects. And so you get a lot of exposure doing a lot of different things. So this is, again, just a breakdown of our technical staff. Like I said, we have about 85 people. The majority are master's level, but we also do have several that are at the PhD or bachelor's level. Again, pulling from all the different public health or science disciplines that we kind of touched on in the last slide. Most of our staff are members of professional societies. So a lot of people, SOT and AHA are the biggest ones. But we really do encourage professional development quite heavily. So we want you to be members of organizations, be active within your local chapters, that sort of a thing. And then we do also encourage our staff to continue their learning and further their development by maybe getting an advanced degree or certification. So we have a lot of staff that have gone back to get their CAH or DABT, or even their master's or PhD if they were originally bachelor's. So this is what our org structure looks like. It's a little bit tricky versus, a normal pyramid structure. So we are kind of broken off into 3 different areas. So we have our regional areas, our practice areas, and our service areas. So kind of starting at the bottom of the matrix, these are our regional areas, which are basically where our office locations are. So we are spread across most of the US. Obviously, closest to you guys would be our Arlington, Virginia office, but we do also have some other East Coast ones. We've got Brooklyn, we've got Boston, and Pittsburgh as well. So that's just basically kind of like the where you're located out of. We don't, silo our work into different hubs. So we don't have like all of our toxicologists in one office and all of our engineers in another office or anything like that. I mean, really it's up to where you want to live and where you want to be, but most of our staff works across offices anyway. So it doesn't necessarily matter where you're located. It's just a matter of where you want to work basically, or where you want to live. Okay, then going up to the left, these are our practice areas. So these are epidemiology, IH or exposure science, toxicology, and computational science. And so when you start, we ask you to align with one of our practice areas. Sometimes people choose two. It's typically what you went to school for, but a lot of times people want to get exposure to other areas. And so they'll join, maybe a practice area that isn't necessarily what they studied in school. But this is just a really good way for us to do trainings, provide mentorship, and make sure that we're really honing our skills. So our practice areas, they meet, pretty regularly, and we kind of do staff projects and things like that through the practice areas. And then on the top right, these are our service areas. So this is basically the areas that we sell to our clients. And so we do a lot of different like business development efforts within these areas, but we've got applied tox, litigation support, product safety, contaminated sites, applied epi. So a lot of different areas here. So really everybody kind of aligns with one or more of each of these. So, you have your regional area, which is basically where you're located out of. You have your practice area, which is kind of your area of specialization. And then you have your service area, which is maybe, some of the initiatives that you want to be a part of as far as working towards client work. These are just some examples of some industries that we work within. So we do a lot in the private sector, but most of our work falls within some of these industries. So we do consumer products, manufacturing, oil and gas. We work with chemical companies, pharmaceutical companies, automotive. And then here you can kind of just see some household names of who our clients have been over the years. So our typical project work, again, we're going to kind of touch on this a little bit more when Lane takes over, but this is just a very generalized what we do. And so I kind of mentioned that we use risk assessment to solve a lot of our problems. So I would say the majority of our work is retrospective. And then, the other portion is more prospective in nature. So as far as the retrospective work goes, basically what that means is that some sort of exposure has already occurred. Some sort of health effect has already occurred based on exposures to particular hazards. And our job is to kind of come in and figure out what happened. So, companies will hire us after, like I said, somebody or a group of people was exposed to something, whether it be in a product or in the environment or at work, and then develop some sort of health outcome. And then our job is to figure out whether or not their exposures at specific levels could have caused that health outcome. So a lot of times that falls in the form of litigation. So companies, perhaps will get sued because of that exposure. So so that's a big portion of what we do. And then the other portion is the more prospective nature. So companies will hire us before they get sued. So maybe if they're launching a new product or opening a new process line or something like that, and they just want to make sure that everything's safe, and they want to find out what health outcomes could occur based on exposures to various hazards. So they'll kind of hire us ahead of time. So there's a lot of different ways that we could get project work. No two projects are the same by any means, and we continue to diversify kind of as time goes on and as we gain more experts within the company. And so a lot of times you'll get projects that you've never worked on before with hazards that you've never even heard of before, and you very quickly become an expert in them because you get to learn a lot of different things. So again, these are some of the hazards that we've worked on. We consider ourselves to be experts on most or all of these. Specifically, we work a lot with asbestos. We do lead, benzene, formaldehyde, silica, but these are just some examples of some of the typical hazards that we work with. And then the other big thing that we do is a lot of original research. And so with that, we publish pretty routinely in scientific journals. And so we really kind of push professional development, as I mentioned earlier, with joining societies and local chapters and that sort of a thing. Another big portion of our professional development is this research. We consider ourselves leaders within the scientific community. And in order to, really maintain that, we like to make sure that we continue to publish on new and novel research in peer-reviewed journals, just to stand by the validity and the merits of our work. A lot of companies, especially consulting companies, will get hired on for jobs and then they do the research. And ours is kind of the other way around in the way that we kind of view things, in that we do the research first and then we get work because of that research. So a lot of times, we kind of task you to say, like, what do you think is going to be an up and coming topic, and what do you want to learn about? And people on our staff will just come up with some amazing ideas and they run with it and they do their own research and they publish. And then down the road, we get a lot of new jobs because we're already experts within those topics. And so it's really nice because, again, coming out of these graduate programs, especially, you really get to continue your research and your knowledge and your studies, and you never really stop learning and growing. And it's just a really great way to get your personal name out there into the scientific community. So what consulting involves, obviously, working on a lot of different topics. Like I said, no two projects, no 2 days are exactly the same. Usually you're kind of bouncing around between a few different projects at once. Some of them range from, a couple weeks and just a few tasks to projects that we've had going on for 10 plus years. So you're kind of balancing both short-term deadlines, long-term deadlines. It's quite a bit of multitasking, but, it kind of keeps things a little bit exciting and, make sure that your days aren't slow and boring or anything like that. But you do get to work on a lot of different topics, a lot of different areas that maybe you've never worked in before. Another thing that's really great about our company is you get to interact with clients pretty early on in your career. So a lot of other consulting companies, they kind of have all the junior staff and they're behind the scenes, and then the more senior staff are more, face-to-face with the clients. But with us, you get to do that pretty early on. So it's a great experience. Like I said, we get to publish our analysis. And so that's a great way to, build your resume up. And then you become pretty proficient in a lot of topics early on. Consulting is kind of like a year in consulting is like working 10 jobs, essentially. So you're not doing the same job for a year. You're kind of getting experience doing a lot of different things. And so it's a great way to, like I said, build up your resume pretty quickly. So our typical day-to-day, you're evaluating and summarizing scientific literature. So whether it be for a project or for your own research, that's a big portion of what we do. So, if you have experience doing lit reviews and summarizing that, that's a lot of our day-to-day. We evaluate allegations and review case materials in litigation type projects. So like I said, that's, a big portion. And again, Lane will kind of talk a little bit more deeply into that in a second. We do quantitative exposure and risk assessments. So that's a huge day-to-day portion of what we do. So if you do have experience with, EPA risk assessment work, that's definitely something that you would do pretty often. The production of technical work products, presentations, proposals. So basically all of our projects end with some sort of written deliverable back to our clients. So, there is quite a bit of writing involved in what we do. So whether it be a report or a summary or a presentation or something like that, it is a lot of reading and a lot of writing for sure. So some of the pros, you get to really grow, continue growing, continue learning. Even coming out of school, we like to think of ourselves as a pretty academic environment for being a corporation. So, you have unlimited opportunities because something new comes in the door every day. There's a lot of different topics and types of work that you can become involved in. I will say over the past, 3 to 4 years, we've really diversified past just, historically we did a lot of just litigation type of work. And now we, as our staff have grown and we've gotten more experts, we've really diversified from that. So, you won't be just working on that type of litigation risk assessment type work. You're getting to do a lot of different things. And, because we're such a small company, you can really get your hands into a lot of different areas. The skill sets that you learn in consulting are certainly transferable to other career paths. So, like I said, just becoming a really strong, proficient writer, getting to work with the clients, getting to, public speaking type things, being able to publish. These are all things that you can take with you to other, career paths if you decide that consulting is not a fit for you. The flexible pathways here and the flexibility to move at your own pace are something that's pretty unique. So, like I kind of mentioned, everybody is on their own growth path. So you're never competing with somebody else for a promotion within the company. You're really only competing with yourself. So everybody has their own growth path and trajectory, and you know exactly what the goals are to hit the next step. And so it's pretty easy to, kind of go through and say, okay, I've got to do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll get promoted. And then once you get to that level, okay, I've got to do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll get promoted again. And so, you're kind of just moving up your own little ladder, and you can do it as slow as you want to, as quick as you want to. Sometimes people come in and they say, I want to move up really, really fast, and I want to learn as much as I can. And they, they work really, really, really hard, and they climb up the ladder, and that's fantastic. And then other people say, like, I want to have a better work-life balance, and I want to really take my time to understand the industry, and they do it a little bit more slowly and deliberately, and that's fine too. So, either way, you kind of have that flexibility to pick and choose how you do it. So it's like a choose your own adventure thing. And the other great thing is that you get to collaborate with colleagues all across the firm. Like I said, we only have about 100 people, so you get to work with everybody very closely. Some of our experts have been in the industry for 30, 40 years, and we have some amazing, incredibly smart and talented people within the company. And so you can get a lot of really great mentorship opportunities. But it's just a great way that you don't get stuck working in your office. You can collaborate with colleagues across the whole company and across Stantec too. So now that we are part of this much larger organization, it's even more opportunities to get to do other things. So some of the cons, the multitasking, a lot of times that stresses people out. So if you're not a person that is good at kind of juggling a lot of different things, or getting rush projects, at the last minute, and having to rearrange your day, or, sometimes, if we do get some of these rush tasks, you might have to work long hours. We don't try to do that very often, and we try to make up for it on the back end to make sure that everyone does have that fantastic work-life balance. But, sometimes with consulting, things can just be a little bit unpredictable. So, that's just definitely one of the cons. That's par for the course a little bit. I will say, a lot of consulting companies, you are traveling a lot, and, sometimes you're on the road Monday through Thursday working for, your clients, sort of a thing. But with us, everything is from the desk. So travel is extremely minimal, maybe once or twice a year. But other than that, you can do everything from the office or from home, which is nice. Okay, so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lane to talk a little bit about our work and our projects.
Perfect. Thanks, Pam. So like Pam was saying a little earlier, our work really revolves around human health risk assessment, and it's really the foundation of like everything that we do, litigation and non-litigation work. So I don't know how familiar you all are with risk assessment, but for all the projects that we work on, we really end up applying the government's risk assessment framework that they use. And this is pretty much a 4 to 5 step process that was developed by the National Academy for Sciences. And it's currently used by the EPA in their evaluations of chemicals and other like issues in heat and the sun, any hazard. And so pretty much the whole idea of is that there's hazard identification. So you're identifying this hazard of concern. Could be a chemical. Typically in our case, it's a chemical or something, or a mineral or something like that. And then you figure out the dose response curve for that hazard. So you're kind of figuring out if there's a dose response relationship and what it is. And then you're doing an exposure assessment for your scenario. So it has to be a pretty lifelike exposure assessment. Like, could this exposure truly happen in life? Is it something that in this occupation, this is a realistic exposure that happens? And then you kind of put all of this together and you determine, where your exposure falls on this dose response curve relative to certain health benchmarks that they decide upon. And so all of that kind of comes together for you to characterize the risk. And really, like, this process and this formula that was thought up by National Academy of Sciences is obviously used by EPA, and it's very well respected, and it's used in all of our project work that we do today. And then you can kind of see in the next slide where, because, sorry.
Did it advance? I don't know. It's like not.
No, it didn't advance.
Okay, sorry.
I can keep talking though.
Okay.
So y'all can kind of tell though that, like, from this risk characterization and from this process of risk assessment, and just generally from what Pam was talking about, the diversity of like backgrounds that we have at ChemRisk and at Stantec, that it's a really multidisciplinary process. So, there's a variety of public health backgrounds. I personally have my background in toxicology, but I work with a lot of industrial hygienists, a lot of epidemiologists, a lot of people with comp sci backgrounds who do a lot of modeling. You can see here, chemists, we have some statisticians on board. And so like you can just tell that it's like there are so many different people and so many different expertises that are really required to figure out this like one risk assessment and to really do an exposure assessment. So just like, for example, like a dose response curve, that would pretty much utilize epidemiology and it would utilize toxicology. And then like the exposure assessment would include industrial hygiene, but it could also include like some comp sci because you need to model where you expect the chemical or where you expect the hazard to go through the environment or to go into the body. So that just kind of goes to show like how multidisciplinary our work can be. I know Pam kind of talked a little bit about our work and how, you know, some of it's prospective, some of it's retrospective and what that means. I know she kind of went a little more into prospective. It can happen two ways that, you know, maybe the exposures occurred, but the disease hasn't happened yet. So that could be like food safety, where the client's wondering whether a disease outcome could happen after there's already been contamination in a certain product, or it could be like she was saying, like where neither's happened, there's no disease yet, no exposure. And so they're really trying, it's like a facility, it's changing a process line or something, and they want to know if they make this change, what exposure could lead to what disease. But that I want to highlight, like was Pam saying, a majority of our work is retrospective. So that means, you know, the disease and the outcome have already occurred. And a lot of the time this is tied to litigation work. And this can pertain to like historical uses of, you know, asbestos containing products, talc, benzene, diacetyl, flavorings. You know, she had that whole list of all the different chemicals and hazards that, you know, we've been requested to look at. So pretty much what we're asked to do is that counsel or like attorneys will come to us for certain corporations and they'll say they want us to perform an exposure or a risk assessment for a certain hazard of interest, and to determine then like if this exposure to this specific hazard was sufficient to increase the risk of development of some health outcome. And then our experts will, you know, testify and explain the science in their risk assessment in certain like trial testimony or in deposition testimony. So really, I guess what they'll give us is counsel will come to us and give us a bunch of different case material. So it could be, you know, testimony, medical records, technical reports, expert reports, product spec sheets, you know, company records and memos, lots of different things that we can kind of comb through and look through to use as information in our exposure and our ultimately our risk assessment. We could even, you know, we may conduct simulation studies and perform our own modeling to try to determine like what the true and real exposure could have been for this person or for these people. Typically the junior staff will and the expert will create this technical report and the findings, and the expert will then explain those findings in deposition and trial. And I want to kind of explain that like these chemicals and these substances typically aren't, it's not just like there was a chemical at this certain place. It's typically in something in like a consumer product, like maybe there's a chemical that's in a hip transplant or in a hip implant. And so how could that chemical then leach from certain hip implant into the body, and how would that risk, how would the exposure be, and how would that risk be measured? So typically these substances are something in consumer products or something related to a manufacturing facility. And then pretty much, yeah, so we kind of review and comb through all of this information, figure out our own exposure estimate, and do our own risk assessment based on all the information that we're provided. And the expert will give their opinion. So the next one just kind of shows some of the interesting work that we've been able to do. We've obviously done a lot of work. I know Pam kind of went into it. We've had a lot of different topics that we've been able to look into. But this one specifically is regarding exposure assessment of laminate flooring. It's actually a project from our industrial hygiene and exposure science practice area. A few years ago, people were claiming to experience certain respiratory irritations after they installed oh, sorry, am I on the wrong one? Sorry about that. I was looking at the old thing for my notes. So emissions and evaluations of additive manufacturing for 3D printed technologies. Again, so we get to do a lot of cool different projects based on like what some of our casework is and what we want our casework to be. So this one you can kind of see evaluated volatile organic compounds and VOCs and nano and micro-sized particulate matters in additive manufacturing machines and 3D printers. So really what we were doing here is identifying compounds of potential concern, assessing potential health hazards associated with these, collecting IH data, and then, you know, we ended up finding, like our conclusions were that these compounds of potential concern, the concentrations of them measured under the study weren't expected to exceed relevant OELs for a worker. And OEL is pretty much like an exposure limit that is safe, considered safe, and considered it should be under, that the exposure should be under. Another one that we've been able to do is looking at baby powder mesothelioma and the risk associated with that. It was pretty much an update to FDA's original cosmetic talc risk assessment. Our team pretty much performed a very similar risk assessment. We used obviously the similar process that's used for risk assessment and expanded the number by exposure scenarios evaluated. So really we were conducting an exposure assessment that relied on the most up-to-date asbestos risk assessment methodologies. And those obviously change like as time changes and as we get better and better technology and better ways and methods to identify certain things like microscopes and different just methodologies that are decided to become better. And so once those are updated, we can update our risk assessment as well. So this one specifically addressed potential infant exposure during diapering, which wasn't done in the original one. And it pretty much evaluated various exposure scenarios. So adult exposure from infant diapering, adult exposure from face diapering, and adult exposure from body powdering. So you can see how, you know, these would cause different exposures overall, just because one, you know, one's applying it to someone else, one's applying it to themselves at their face. It could be easier to breathe in, one's applying it to just their body in general. So it changes the exposure of the overall scenario. And then we've also had a lot of work with electronic nicotine devices. So nicotine and tobacco regulatory support services is a large service area of ours. In an overview, we kind of evaluated the public health impacts of these nicotine and tobacco products for regulatory review by the US FDA. And we were looking at these non-clinical and clinical studies and data and leading our own comprehensive research program. So a lot of literature review, a lot of just combing through all of the data that we found and that was already there in order to kind of review the safety of these nicotine delivery systems, e-liquid products, different, you know, nicotine products that are technically like leafless. So this, like, we were able to provide them with, you know, product testing, chemistry research, tox research, microbial research, all of these things we were able to give them help with and kind of tell them like how to safely sell certain products and how really they should be regulated or not regulated based on their safety compared to other products that are out there. And then as well as that, we've done some PBPK modeling. This was specifically for developmental toxicity in nursing infants from ethanol exposures. So obviously it's a pretty interesting exposure route right here. And it's a very important time of development. And so you can kind of see what we did. We developed a PBPK model for determining blood ethanol concentrations following hand sanitizer use and compared the BECs, the blood ethanol concentrations from hand sanitizer use to these different things. So those associated with developmental toxicity that was found in the literature based on our lit review and our lit search, and then those associated with breastfeeding public health guidelines. And there's obviously lots of guidelines that are out there from different regulatory bodies. And we ended up concluding and finding that the blood ethanol concentrations from hand sanitizer use were actually lower than those associated with toxicity and from other guidance materials. So overall, we found that there was a low potential for health hazard to any of the infants that were nursing from maternal use of ethanol-containing hand sanitizers. And this was especially important, I would say, when the pandemic really set off, just because, hand sanitizer was just everywhere, it was selling everywhere. And so it's just, and you wanted to make sure that it was safe. And a bunch of mothers, of course, want to make sure that whatever they're using while they're breastfeeding their children is safe as well. Another one that we've done is the use of in silico models to identify hazards. In silico, I guess, is a little newer, but still pretty, I guess, well known. So we were proposing and evaluating high throughput in silico frameworks to identify PFAS hazards in absence of in vivo data. I think this is especially relevant considering, where people are trying to, and regulatory bodies are trying to go further and further away from using animal models. And so we're pretty much using this in vitro data for PFOA and PFAS that was sourced from ToxCast and identifying certain genes that were, changed, either significantly up or down regulated by exposure to these PFAS substances. And then could use Reactome to identify the processes and the pathways that were associated with these genes. And so we could validate our approach by predicting the hazards and with the reported hazards that were previously seen from that in vitro data, and then kind of use this as a tool. So we're showing this in silico framework and validating it and showing how it goes to this in vitro data and how it can be used in the future. And that's just a few of the things that we've been able to do. So there's many, many more papers that we have and have presented on. So
great, thank you, Lane. Yeah, that was just a couple of highlights of some cool projects, but there's a lot more on the website too. So if you guys check that out, you can see some of the other nice things that we've worked on over the past couple of years. So next, we're just going to touch a little bit on employees' perspective so you can get a sense of what our culture looks like and what it's like to work for our organization. If I can get my slides to work. Okay, one sec. Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. Let's try this again. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we asked our staff to describe the culture in one word, and these were just a couple of the things that came up. This is one of those diagrams where obviously, like, the larger the word, the more was said. So just some things that are descriptions are intellectual. Like I said, it's very easy transition from academia, and that you really do continue your learning and your studies. It's collaborative. All of our projects are team projects. I mean, you do work individually on whatever your tasks are, but everything is, project team based. Even, the manuscript writing and the research and things like that, you do usually work with a team. So it's extremely collaborative. It's rewarding in that, you're working on things that really do, affect change. And you're a lot of the stuff that's, we read about in the news and stuff that's pretty relevant right now is a lot of the stuff that we're actually working on. And so it's really cool seeing, that the stuff that you do actually, transition somewhere else. It's energetic. So, like I said, every day is a little bit different, and you kind of, it keeps things moving and bustling. And especially when you're working within the office, and you're collaborating with your colleagues, and everything is, definitely energetic. Our staff is very driven. We typically hire straight from school. And so, a lot of our staff is young and eager to learn, kind of starting from the same place. And so, it makes for this amazing, driven atmosphere, like I said. It's flexible. The career paths are flexible. The work itself is flexible. And it's, definitely stimulating to, be, again, working on different things every day. So some things that our employees value the most about working here. Number one is the people. Every time I ask people what their favorite thing is about working for Chemrix, they always say the people. We have such an amazing team. We're kind of like one big, great big family, but everyone is extremely, bright and talented and, like I said, energetic and eager to learn. And it's nice to have that culture of collaboration versus competition. And I think a lot of that falls within the fact that we don't compete with each other for promotions and roles and things like that. And so it makes for, an extremely supportive environment all across the board. You do get the opportunity to work on some really cool things. Lane just described some of our projects, but that's only a couple of things that we've done, but everything, it's really cool and different and things that maybe you never would have thought of. It's a very flat, open door culture. You kind of saw our structure in that matrix form. It's not a pyramid structure, so you really can go to anyone at any time for anything. It's definitely, we're all on a first name basis and everybody knows each other. And so that's really, really nice. Having the flexibility and the freedom and autonomy is great. You never have anyone kind of breathing down your neck, asking what you're doing, what you're spending your time on. You work very independently and autonomously. So you really can kind of pick and choose what your day looks like and what you're going to be working on. When we are in the office, we have great snacks and we do a lot of different, types of like camaraderie events. We have a donation budget, so we also do some cool volunteering type things. And then lastly, the commitment to original research. So camaraderie, this is just some examples of some things we've done. Some of this was obviously during the pandemic when we were all virtual. But when we are in person, we try to do a lot of different like happy hours, holiday parties, like I said, volunteering events, different team building things. And so, we really try to work hard, but also play hard as well. So diversity and inclusion, this is something that we wanted to touch on within the presentation. These are just like some of the things that we have here at Stantec. So they have a bunch of different employee resource groups. So you can see there's Women at Stantec, Pride at Stantec, Indigenous Connections, Latinos, persons with disabilities, military, cultural awareness and inclusion, and then Asians at Stantec. So there's a lot of different groups that you can join. We also have these ID&E councils. And so the councils reflect the diversity across the company, and especially the diversity that we want to achieve. And so they pull from people with different life experiences and from different cultures and backgrounds. And their job as council members is to kind of move along our ID&E strategy. And so that's a great way to get involved. But there's just a lot of, different cool things and initiatives that they're doing across the company to pursue equity, drive change, and make sure that we have the fair and respectful treatment of all of our people. So if you are interested in careers in consulting, there are some things that you can do to prepare. Definitely seeking out public speaking opportunities. There's definitely no shortage of this within the company. You're often presenting to not only your colleagues and peers, but also to your clients. So being able to, be comfortable speaking and being able to do it in layman's terms is something that's important. You should consider taking extra courses in risk and exposure assessment. Obviously, that's the most important one because that's kind of like the crux of what we do. But if you've never taken an EPI course or maybe environmental or occupational talks, those would be some good things that you can get some experience in, or industrial hygiene, health physics, some of those things as well. And then lastly, publish if possible. It's a great way to get experience publishing. It's a great way to get your name out there into the scientific community and get experience on learning some different topics. So with that, some different ways that you can apply. You can go to cardnochemrist.com and visit our careers page. You can send your resume and cover letter to the email address that's on the flyer. I believe it's jhurecruiting@cardno.com, something like that. And you can find me or Lane on LinkedIn. That's a great way to reach out and connect, but we are always accepting applications. We hire on a rolling basis, which means that we're just always looking for great talent. We're not looking to fill specific positions. So, you can apply now, you can apply in the spring, you can apply next year. So really, it kind of just depends. And we are hiring for full-time and interns for next summer. And so even if you're not graduating until 2024, you can certainly apply for an internship. if you are graduating 2023, it's not too soon to start applying now for jobs. For you, the sooner the better, because then you can have your job locked in before the end of your graduating year. But we're definitely looking at people graduating in both December and May for right now. So. And with that, I think we can turn it over for questions. So we are so grateful that you all came today. I hope that we were able to shed some good light on what it's like to work for a scientific consulting company and for our company in particular. And we definitely hope you consider a career within the industry, even if it's not necessarily with ChemRisk. So so I'll turn it over for any questions.
Yeah. Awesome. So I allowed everyone to unmute themselves. So if you'd like to come off of mute and ask Pam or Lane a question, feel free to do so. And I also dropped that Johns Hopkins Recruiting at Cardno email address in the chat as well, if you want to refer to that.
Thank you. Perfect.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi. First of all, thank you for a great introduction. And I'd just like to know whether if the company will sponsor OPT for international students.
So as of right now, no. We have done it before for interns. Are you looking for an internship or a full-time position?
Internship.
For internships. Okay. So we have done it for interns, but I will say because we don't do sponsorships for full-time staff, we will consider an OPT, but typically because you're limited to only a certain amount of years, they will give priority to people that could be long-term hires. So it's not that the answer is no, it's just that I think, like I said, I think the priority usually goes to people that would be considered, we would be able to work for us long-term versus people that are limited in the amount of time. For internships, it doesn't necessarily matter as much, but for full-timers.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hi, this is Tianyi, and first I want to thank you for your presentation, Pamela and Alan, and thank you for sharing your experience at Cardno. And that's the previous question is actually one of mine, so I will ask the second one. So I know you have talked about Cardno has been acquired by Stantec. Has the job posting process or hiring process have been changed?
It has not, no. So as of right now, everything is still exactly the same. We're moving to a different applicant tracking system, but that's kind of really the only thing that would change over. Other than that, the whole process will kind of remain the same. We do our hiring pretty organically within Cardno ChemRisk, so we like to do it all ourselves versus having outside recruiters do it. So everything should hopefully remain the same as it is now.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Oh, there's one that went through the chat. So Amanda said, do you have any idea of ChemRisk's plans for navigating remote versus in-person work in the next year or so?
Yeah, so I think the goal is to continue on some sort of a hybrid capacity. So, especially for more junior level or newer staff, we like you to be in the office a couple of days a week just to, I think get the experience of working with some of your colleagues. And I think, as in terms of training and learning early on in your career, it's pretty important to have that face time. So while we will never ask anyone to be in the office full time anymore, I think we will try to get everybody within the office at least a couple of days a week. And so I don't know that we would bring on somebody that doesn't live or wouldn't live near an office location. But from there, it definitely will probably remain some sort of a hybrid.
Great. And I just put the flyer that you had sent me, Pam, which was sent out in the promo emails. But if anybody wants to refer to that, that also has some more information and the email address on it.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I think we have time for maybe one more question if anyone has one they'd like to ask. Pam, Lane, you guys were just too good today.
I guess
You
we
answered
were
all
very
the
thorough.
questions.
Answered all
You
the
are
questions.
thorough, and I appreciate that. Okay, well, if that's the case, I think we can go ahead and give people just a couple of minutes back in the hour, but just want to thank both Pam and Lane for taking the time out of their day to come and speak with us. It's a really informative presentation, and hopefully you'll have some good applicants to Cardno sometime soon. I did want to ask, is that email address going to stay the same with the rebrand? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So they will just direct. We will have Stantec email addresses as well, but all of our Cardno stuff will still direct to.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon, and hope everybody has a great rest of your day and a nice weekend. So talk to you later.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks.
everybody. Have a wonderful
Bye-bye.
afternoon.